taking over Greenland from Denmark, and that is a huge topic of conversation at the World Economic Forum because so many leaders from Europe are there, and negotiations over Greenland will take place later today. But you also probably heard him referencing something that's going to impact a lot of Americans here at home, and that is housing affordability, which has been a huge issue for the past several years. It really got worse during the COVID pandemic and during the Biden administration, and now President Trump says he's going to try to tackle this issue and bring down housing costs. But he has to strike a difficult balance because on the one hand, he wants to make sure that housing is affordable for those looking to buy a house. But on the other hand, he said in his speech today that he wants to maintain high housing prices for those who have equity in a home, who own a home right now. Of course, you don't want to tank the market because so many Americans, that's their biggest investment of their lives is home ownership. That's the American dream after all. So he's trying to make it attainable while also making sure that he maintains those high prices for those who currently have a house. The steps that so far he's taking to do that are threefold. The first, which he signed an executive order on yesterday before he left for Davos, is to basically block or ban big Wall Street firms from buying single-family homes. As you may know, these big investment firms over the last decade, maybe a little bit more than that, have been buying up these single-family homes and then renting them. That, of course, is good for those investment companies because they can make money off of renting these houses out, and they also have the real estate value of the homes themselves. But it's causing a problem in the housing market for those looking to get into it, to buy a house, everyday Americans looking to do that, because there's limited inventory. That's a huge problem driving up housing costs because these investment firms have bought, as the president said, up to 10% of all single-family homes in the United States. And so what President Trump is trying to do by blocking these Wall Street firms from buying single-family homes is open up that inventory to everyday Americans trying to buy a house. The second part of this plan is directing Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac to buy mortgage bonds, $200 billion in mortgage bonds. And the goal of that is to lower interest rates for those looking to get a mortgage, a loan to buy a house. And then the third part of this might seem unrelated, but the president kind of connected the dots in his speech today, and that's capping credit card interest rates. So what the president says is that Americans are strapped with credit card debt because these credit card companies are charging such high interest rates for people who use credit cards to make purchases, so that they're unable to save money to put a down payment down because the interest rates on their credit cards are so high. So what he's looking to do is cap credit card interest rates at 10%, which in theory would mean that Americans have more money to save up and make a down payment on their house. So the president covered all of this during his speech today in Davos. Obviously, as I mentioned, a huge focus of the speech was Greenland, but these are really some takeaways that everyday Americans could benefit from here if they have the intended effect of making houses more affordable in the United States. And as I talk here, I'm monitoring the live stream on my phone, so if you have any questions about how this is going to work or comments or anything you want to add to the conversation, I'm happy to take a look here. But I think this is an important issue, and especially limiting these Wall Street firms from buying houses is something that you might expect to be proposed by a Democratic lawmaker. And in fact, some Democratic lawmakers have made this proposal. So in a way, President Trump might be able to, make this a bipartisan issue that some of the more progressive, liberal Democratic lawmakers could get behind, because after all, this executive order is in place right now, but he also wants Congress to pass a law so that these big investment firms can't buy up houses. So I'm going to scroll through your questions and comments as I continue to have this conversation. I'm reading from Sophia, who says that it's an interesting take. Limiting large Wall Street investors from snagging up single-family homes could ease competition for everyday buyers, but it's not a silver bullet without boosting housing supply. Prices may stay high, this move helps, but broader reforms are still needed. Sophia, to your point, that is also something that the Trump administration has noted and is trying to take steps to alleviate, because obviously these single family homes that are owned by investment firms, it's not, if you open all of that inventory up, we still don't have enough housing inventory in the United States. So some of the things the administration is doing to boost inventory outside of this executive order are, for example, making housing permits easier to get for federal land. That's not national parks necessarily, but it's land that is owned by the federal government. So if they make that available, that could boost housing supply. Another thing that the administration talks a lot about is just cutting red tape in general, making it a lot easier and streamlining the process of building homes. Obviously, the previous administration had a lot of environmental issues that they seemingly chose to use to dictate policy. And the Trump administration, on the other hand, is not focusing as much on those issues as they are these real-world affordability issues that Americans are facing. The timing of this is interesting, too, because President Trump is going to be hitting the road. We learned yesterday on Air Force One, Susie Wiles, the chief of staff at the White House, said that every week up until the midterms, the president is going to go somewhere in the United States and talk about issues affecting Americans from now till November. And next week, we understand he's going to be going to Iowa. We don't have the details on that, but he's going to be talking about the state of the economy there. And the president is very pleased with the state of the economy. You've heard in his speech today and in speeches he's made in the weeks leading up to Davos that he feels that his administration has turned around an economy that was really in the pits from the previous administration. But when you look at polling on the economy, what you see is that a lot of Americans still feel that life, everyday items like groceries and food and housing and all of those things that we need, energy, all of those things a lot of people feel are still too expensive. Maybe part of that is because inflation surged and still hasn't come back down to that 2% level, which is the ideal level that the Fed looks at. And so now the Trump administration has to figure out how to tangibly address this issue, especially before voters head to the polls in November in these midterm elections. I'm reading another comment from Cyril, sorry if I'm mispronouncing your name. He says, or she says, this targets a real problem. When large investors compete with ordinary families for single-family homes, prices naturally rise. Limiting institutional buying could help restore housing as a place to live, not just a financial asset. That's a really good point, and it echoes what President Trump said in Davos today. In fact, it was kind of a funny moment when he mentioned the housing affordability topic, because he acknowledged that a lot of the people in the room at the World Economic Forum are these big institutional investors that would be targeted by this proposal. So this is the quote that we've been using in our reports today. President Trump says to the people in the room at the Economic Forum, "Many of you are my good friends. Many of you are supporters. Sorry, I am so sorry, but you've driven up housing prices by purchasing hundreds of thousands of single-family homes, and it's been a great investment for them, the institutional investors, often as much as 10% of houses on the market. But," he says, "homes are built for people, not for corporations, and America will not become a nation of renters." And that's the big concern here, that these institutional investment firms have access to capital, have these massive funds, and they're able to use that money to buy up these homes and charge rent for them, and who, from an everyday American standpoint, who can compete with these big Wall Street investment firms. So that's what the president is looking to do on that front, to tackle housing affordability. But to some of the points you guys are making in the comments, there is a lot more that needs to be done to improve inventory, to make sure that more housing supply is generated so that housing prices can come down slightly, but as the president points out, you don't want to bring down housing costs too much, because then people who have invested their life into their homes lose out when they try to sell their house, because that is such a big part of their net worth. For most people, as you know, buying a house is the biggest investment they will ever make in their life. So stay tuned on this front. It sounds like the administration has a lot planned when it comes to housing affordability, but they announced these 3 prongs today in Davos, President Trump did, which includes, again, banning these institutional investors from buying up single-family homes, directing Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac from buying to buy mortgage bonds, which ideally would lower interest rates, and thirdly, potentially capping credit card interest rates at 10%, which would theoretically free up some cash that Americans could save for down payments on homes. But President Trump would need Congress to act on that front, and he's calling on Congress also to act to make sure that there's a law in place preventing those investment firms from buying single-family homes. So more to come, but this is kind of the recap as it relates to housing affordability, home buying, and that's the big headline from Davos on that topic, while also we continue to follow what the president says when it comes to Greenland, a big topic of interest for all of us here in Washington, D.C., and all of those countries in Europe who are at the World Economic Forum as well. So thank you so much, guys, for tuning in. Really appreciate it. And that's your little news tidbit for today from here on Capitol Hill as we monitor President Trump in Davos.